Hey, good morning. Welcome to the Stochastic.com MLB Strategy Show. 11 game action heading into the weekend, Friday night. Coors Field. Yeah. Great American Ballpark. Yeah. Got some good ones. 15-mile-per-hour winds blowing out the left center in Minnesota. All right. We got some games. We got some stuff to talk about. Happy to have you guys with us. First thing, before we do anything, take 1 single second, atone for your sins here. Friday morning, hit that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Goes a very long way for us, and we appreciate you in advance. Also, leave a comment down below. You're listening or watching after the fact. And if you ever want to listen in podcast form, you know where to find us. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, just search Stochastic. It'll pop up. Leave us a rating and a review there too, if you'd be so kind. Anyway, I'm Dave Loughran. That's Matt Belman. Closing out the week with a big slate today. What's going on, brother?
Nothing, man. Friday, always fun. Yeah, I was thinking about this when I realized that the Phillies were going to be in Coors. So like last night, we've had so many slates recently where offense has just been spread out. Choose who you want basically on every single slate. I think that's coming to an end tonight.
You might be right. You might be right. Man, yesterday looked really good for me until everything looked great. Everything looked great. First of all, I went and I decided, well, here's what I'm going to do. I ended up like making some caps and some ROI boosts in the Sims. And I ended up getting around the same exposure because I talked about Waldron. He had 7 Ks. He just had those first couple innings that hurt his pitch count. He was fine, right? If he got the win, you would have been around 20. He was fine. But I had around 30% Waldron, Feltner, and Estes. So like 30% of all of them as my cheap guys. Everything's looking good. I had the right exposure to all of the right stacks. And I go and I do some stuff. I get on a call for, here at work and I'm doing other stuff. I look and I'm like, man, I'm in great shape. It's like 9th inning in that game. What could really go wrong? And then I go and I see a notifications telling me what I've won and I lost money. It turns out that game had fucking 100 runs in extras.
Yeah, I'm still salty as hell about that. I said on this show, anything can happen in that game. I could see 8-9. I could see 3-2. I played one lineup yesterday, and obviously this is one of the big parts that sucks about playing minimal lineups. You just can't get to not even everyone, like most things on each slate. And I liked the Rockies and A's, but I didn't play it. I also played Castillo, which was a mistake. As soon as the slate locked, I knew it, even despite him being low owned. And yeah, you just don't see that in MLB that often where like they're really going back and forth in extras. Usually if a team scores 2+ runs, they're going to win that game. But man, it just kept going back and forth. Guys were homering. You needed part of that game for any sort of a takedown.
It was crazy, man. I'm not even kidding. It's the 10th inning, or I'm sorry, it was going into the 9th. And I basically was like, okay, there we go. I got a couple good Feltner lineups towards the top. I'll get 4 points there. My Estes lineups towards the top will fall back. I'll live with that. Be a good day. Nice profit. Nothing crazy. It was like a 2X looking type of day. And then I'm like, wait, how is that actually possible? Like, even if it went into extras, like you said, you expect maybe 1 or 2 extra runs, 3 maybe. There were let's see here. There were 11 runs scored in extra innings. 11 runs scored in extras in the 10 and 11th.
When you get these bad bullpens, and I know Oakland has a good back end, but I don't know, not even that. That's just a ultra outlier outcome in my eyes. And
big time.
I'm salty as hell because I was going to play it, but woulda, coulda, shoulda can do that on every slate.
Anyway, happy you guys could join us today. Should be a fun one. Hopefully you guys had a great day yesterday, and I hope you have a good weekend because I won't see you until Monday. But let's dive into it. So we got the top stacks tool pulled up, top pitchers. I already ran the Sims today. I went 10% payout to first on this one. I assume, Jacob, did you go 25% on yours so we can kind of compare and contrast here? All right, yeah. So, I mean, I do that because you have the mini max, which is, I think, 60K today. And, of course, the big one, the relay throw, which is always like 25, 30 some percent to first. But looking at pitching, number one, let's get this out of the way first. There's no pitcher that stands out in a way where you go, wow, I must have all of him today. And then even Corbin Burns, that game has a good chance of not playing, and he's facing the White Sox. Like, I'm not sure you could comfortably play Corbin Burns right now until we get more news on whether or not this game is just not going to happen or something clears out and it ends up being okay.
I'm with you on the Corbin Burns part. I'm not with you on the first part. Maybe I'm different here, but give me all the Zach Gallen. I think he is by far the best pitcher on the slate, especially when you consider Burns is probably not an option. Imanaga might not be an option. I find it extremely hard to not play Gallen.
Okay. I mean, hey, I understand it. Gallen has been remarkably good at home. This Miami team is not good. I'm not going to argue on that. I still don't think Zach Gallen stands out as I must play all of this guy today like I have sometimes, because you're paying a big time premium on Zach Gallen. Like, this is a guy who last time out was $1,000 cheaper. He's like, and I think that's the reason right now, by the way, if that Baltimore White Sox game gets rained out, then Gallen's ownership comes up. But I think the reason he's getting sub 20% right now is because you're paying $10,300 for a very, very good pitcher, but not a like Tyler Glasnow style pitcher or quality pitcher.
I think he's every bit the quality, just not the strikeout pitcher here. And okay, we're nitpicking a little bit, but yeah, I don't have Gallen as like the best pitching option we've seen all year or anything like that. I just think, again, when you take Burns out of the equation, potentially Imanaga out, there is no other pitcher on this slate that I even feel remotely good about. I feel great about Gallen. Whether you want to say he's an auto lock or whatever, I don't have any arguments with that, with not playing 100% or whatever. I just think he looks a lot better than everyone else.
So like you prefer Gallen at 17, like significantly prefer Gallen at $1,700 more than Justin Verlander, who's facing Oakland today?
Yeah, significantly more. I prefer him significantly more than Burns, even though
really,
I mean, the matchup, yeah. Burns' strikeout stuff has been down. I know that it spiked last start against the Mariners. I think Gallen, for my money, I'd rather have Gallen than Burns. So I'm a huge Gallen guy.
Okay. I suppose we could dig into it. I mean, the thing is, looking at some of the top priced guys, Imanaga's up there. Yeah, 11K there is that's going to suppress ownership a ton. Rodon
weather
against, what's that?
Weather also there.
Weather as well. I think from what I was looking at earlier that game should be okay. I think, cool. But I don't know. Maybe not. You know what? Now that I'm looking at it, no, I think you're right. It looks a little bit sketchier than it did earlier when I was looking, but okay. So Imanaga, not very popular, highest price pitcher on the slate. He's been remarkable this year. Corbin Burns, they probably don't get that game in. If they do, I would put him in the same bucket. Personally, would put him in the same bucket as Zach Gallen today against the White Sox. Last I looked, the White Sox have a 2.8 run implied total, just extraordinarily low. And then Rodon has a tough matchup against San Diego. There really aren't that many high-priced options. Cutter Crawford has Milwaukee. Verlander against Oakland. Verlander has a 9% swinging strike rate this year. I'd be lying if I said there's anything about him that stands out to me as, hey, this guy has been fantastic. If anything, things stand out to me that, hey, this guy is 41 years old. You know, he's had a couple really nice starts. He's had a couple really ugly starts. He has a 5.22 xFIP. Not great. 3.89 xERA. He's been okay, but the strikeout stuff has really been lacking through his first handful of starts. And then what? Kyle Harrison against the Mets. Bailey Ober against Texas. I mean, yeah, maybe the argument that you could make in favor of Gallen, and I suppose this is what you were doing, is that the good high-priced pitchers are either really expensive or just in terrible weather. And then all of these like upper mid-range guys, lower high-priced options, Rodon, Crawford, Harrison, none of them have particularly good matchups at all.
Yeah, that was kind of what I was saying when I was talking about Gallen. And to your other point about Burns, that you'd lump him in the same bucket with Gallen, so would I. I think that if the weather was clear here, those two guys would be by far the top two options. I prefer Gallen, but wouldn't fault or argue with anyone who would prefer Burns there.
David said Verlander going to get smashed stacking Oakland. All right. I mean, sure. He has given up a little bit of power. Not surprising. He's not the same pitcher he once was. I still like this is more a spot for me where I'd rather
not play Verlander.
If I'm not getting the Verlander, I'd probably just not really want this game. You know, I don't know if I'm super inclined to stack Oakland on an 11-game slate. That's what it comes down to. Like, I think I could probably find cheaper options, more, other low-owned options, at the same rate. But we got to talk about Christopher Sanchez because he's very cheap. Again, DraftKings has not done a particularly good job of pricing pitchers in Coors Field this season. I've said it once. I'll say it a million times. The Colorado Rockies are bad. I mean, just outright terrible. You look at some of these rates against lefties on the season too. They're towards the bottom in everything, right? Like they're bottom 5 in weighted on base average, 79 WRC plus. Everything's bad. But also, and I think you and I talked about this before, the one that stands out to me that's kind of the craziest is you look at their home and road splits and you go, all right, well, they might be bad, but they're probably still good at home. The Rockies have still not been good at home. You look at WRC plus, like all teams at home for the whole season, the Rockies are 28th in WRC plus. 146 ISO is not that good either. That sits 19th in baseball. They also have a 26% K rate at home, a park that generally suppresses strikeouts. So at 7,200, I do understand why Sanchez is getting ownership. I'd be lying if I said it 23% on an 11-game slate. I loved him, though. And I think this is probably a spot I get less of than the field.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what to make of Sanchez so far. He's kind of had a roller coaster year. Certainly had a high upside game against the Rockies last time out. I'm with you. I think he's fine, but the ownership is already there. Considering ownership is about equal, I think I'd rather play Patrick Sandoval. The Guardians are better than the Rockies, but the Guardians also aren't as good against left-handed pitching, and they're not in Coors. So all things being equal, give me Sandoval over Sanchez here.
I might go back to Christian Scott, honestly.
He's getting ownership too, and it makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, he is very cheap for who he is. Again, he wasn't great last time out, but he was very good in the 2 starts before that. His underlines are very, very good. And he just works on this slate because, as we've talked about, there aren't great options.
And admittedly, I liked him last time out. He just wasn't very good. I think he gave up a 3-run shot early, and it went downhill from there. San Francisco, middle of the road in K rate versus righties. This is essentially a team that is just, it's kind of fair to say, right? Like San Francisco, when it comes to opposing pitchers, they feel pretty like middle of the road everywhere.
Yeah, they do. That's just like who they are. And again, not like these guys are massive bats or anything, but Conforto's on the IL and they lost Jung-Hoo Lee for the season. Probably their 2 best left-handed bats coming into the season. So I don't know. I get why Scott's getting love here. It makes a lot of sense.
Well, one of the things is that he's sub 8K. He has 24% strikeout rate. This guy in the minor leagues, like all throughout every level at the minor leagues, was a 30+% strikeout guy. Really good stuff. I think we know that. You look at his xERA through the first 16 and 2/3 innings. It's 3.14, 3.87 xFIP. The numbers are actually pretty good. Like 340 BABIP. So I think ultimately he's going to be a good pitcher, right? 14.5% swinging strike rate. I really don't hate this spot at all. Citi Field's a perfectly fine venue. And then when you actually look at the implied total for the San Francisco, for San Francisco today, it's at 3.6. So kind of across the board, Scott does profile as a pretty good option at a mid-range price point. Personally, I do like him over Christopher Sanchez. I think Christopher Sanchez has been great, but as your number 5 pitcher for the Philadelphia Phillies, I'm just not convinced that this holds up across the course of the season, because he has been good, man. Like, even his underlying numbers are good. I want to take nothing away from him, but I still have some reservations going into Coors Field today. I prefer Scott a little bit more with a better park.
He's putting too many guys on base for me to really want to have confidence in Sanchez here. He has been good, but I'm just not really a fan of this spot, especially with the ownership. So I'll say this, like, after the top end guys, I think Scott looks like the best option, price and ownership considered, under 9K, under 10K really. But I'm a tad worried that his ownership is going to balloon. Not like Paul Skeens yesterday, but Christian Scott is like the shiny new toy. Again, not to the extent that Skeens is, but he's a rookie who hasn't made many starts. And it's the same exact matchup Skeens was in yesterday. So I'm a little worried about that, to be honest.
Okay. Einsteinium, Laffy, Braxton Garrett for all the money. That's Matt's guy too. Yeah, I bet him under 15.5 outs today. So Einsteinium, feel free to come tell me if I'm wrong when I am, if I am. Number one, I think I know actually Garrett is much better than the performance through his first 2 starts. Much better. Undeniably. He faced Philly. He faced the Mets. They got to him. They tuned him up. He's been very unlucky through his first 2 starts. He also hasn't been good, but he's been unlucky. And the strikeout stuff has still been there. Here's the thing I hate about this. The Arizona Diamondbacks are first in batting average, first in runs scored against righties, second in WRC plus, second in weighted on base average, fourth in isolated slugging, and they have the second lowest strikeout rate in all of baseball. So when you look at some of that, it just doesn't feel very good. Even Skubal went out there against Arizona, right? I think what did he allow? Like 1 hit in 6 innings or something? When you and I talked about this similar matchup for a lefty last week against Arizona in Arizona. But the other difference is, number one, Skubal is elite. But 2, Matt, I think he only had a handful of strikeouts in that spot. I only had 6, so he was actually pretty damn good. But like Skubal, I think Braxton Garrett bounces back. I'm just not super convinced that this is the day he does it. If your argument is like, this guy's way cheaper than he should be and he has great strikeout stuff, I'm going to have a tough time arguing against you there. I would just posit that the matchup specifically against the Diamondbacks with how they've performed against lefties is less than ideal.
Yeah, this doesn't always happen, but you said everything. I mean, there's nothing more that needs to be said about Garrett. You said all the relevant points. Like, he's too cheap for a strikeout upside, but this isn't the spot I want to go to him. I don't like using lefties, and I never do use lefties against Arizona.
Yeah. Do you like Arizona?
A little bit. They're also getting ownership. And just to expand on the point that he's cheap, the other thing that goes with that, which is another reason why I don't think you're crazy to look at Garrett here, the pitching options on this slate aren't very good. And his talent level is much more of a 7K pitcher, at least, if not higher than that, in the 5,800 he's priced at. So I hate the matchup, but there aren't other guys really that I feel comfortable with. So at the end of the day, he's one of the cheapest guys, and he's too cheap for his strikeout upside. So I don't hate it, just not the spot I'm going to go to personal.
Yeah, I don't think it's crazy at 7% ownership. Matter of fact, we have Braxton Garrett owned exactly where he should be, right? Like, we have him as a 7.9% top 2 pitcher on DraftKings, 7.6% ownership. So we really have him almost exactly where he should be. I will say though, in the Sims, I am getting an exorbitant amount, Einsteinium, of Braxton Garrett right now.
Okay.
And
That's all we need to know.
yeah, I buried the lead for a minute there. Like I
Yeah,
said,
I love.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead. Sorry.
What I was going to say is I do understand it because it is unusual to get guys with his strikeout upside. And Matt, to be fair, Braxton Garrett's pedigree at that price point. I get it. This guy has been rocked through his first 2 starts. You could find me on either side of this one. I think I could make a fantastic argument. You know how I say like you can make a good argument
Yeah.
on either side. There's certain guys that's just not the case. Like you're not going to find me in Ty Block's corner today, right? You're not going to find me with a lot of Ross Stripling or Bryce Wilson. But I do think the argument to be made for Braxton Garrett is this guy strikes guys out. He has a 3.33 xFIP through his first 2 starts, a 10.24 ERA. He has been unlucky. There is no doubt about that. He has been very unlucky. But Arizona is a tough matchup. So, you know, it's a give and take. Something's going to happen here. I think the most likely outcome is that Garrett is okay and doesn't generate a lot of strikeouts, and Arizona isn't great either, but I can understand the exposure going to him at a sub 6K price point.
The more I look at it, the more I like it because of the points you said, but also what I keep mentioning. This is not a good pitching slate. There are good options, but they're all in tough matchups. DraftKings also priced up the Phillies and other teams today. So if you play Gallen, it's not as easy to play expensive bats, certainly if you use another expensive pitcher. Man, the fact that he's cheaper than Jose Urania and Chris Flexen and like the same price as Ross Stripling, that should never be the case. If there was ever a slate to just overlook the matchup, it might be this one because there isn't a ton of opportunity cost in my eyes. And yeah, there's certainly a low floor here. Arizona's lineup is built to hit lefties. They don't strike out a lot, et cetera, et cetera. But points per dollar, he's got to have the highest upside of any pitcher on the slate. I'm digging it a lot more the more we look at the pitching options on this slate. Like, I don't love a 7,700 Patrick Sandoval.
Me neither. You know, I looked it up on StatMuse earlier. Really cool site, man. Like left-handed starting pitchers versus Diamondbacks this season game log. And it just gives you every left-handed starter to face them. 2/3 have gone 5 innings or fewer against the Diamondbacks. And you'd be like, yeah, but Laffy, who were those pitchers? Some pretty good ones. Some pretty good ones. You know, a lot of them just didn't have great stuff against them, which isn't really all that surprising. You know, Chris Sale was average. Max Fried did not get out of the 5th inning. Snell did not get out of the 5th inning against them. Cortez did not get out of the 5th inning against them. You know, like
Sale's the biggest one. He's been like the best pitcher in baseball this year.
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm sorry. He went 5 1/3. He was fine. Again, like he went 5 1/3, 2 runs and 6 Ks, which is, that's kind of what I mean. A good start against the Diamondbacks is something for a lefty is like that. You know, it's crazy. And I'm just looking at this now. Wow. No starting pitcher to face them this season. No starting lefty. And there's been 15 of them. Let's see. Sorry. 19 of them. Not one of them has more than 6 strikeouts.
Man. And you just look at their total numbers against lefties this year, hitting 292 with 350 on base percentage. Like, they crush lefties. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt
Dude, that's
about
crazy.
that.
That's crazy, though. Sorry, 18 left-handed starting pitchers. There isn't a single southpaw starter with more than 6 Ks. And 15 of 18 have gone 5 strikeouts or less.
That's nuts.
12 have gone 4 or fewer strikeouts. Pretty crazy. But DFS is different. Like DFS is so much different than betting. I could like unders on Garrett, but not care because you're playing for the variance. Like right, the range of outcomes for Braxton Garrett's kind of wild today.
Yeah, huge.
Playing for the upside, I have no issue with there. So Einsteinium, I hear you. But would I be surprised if he gets shit on? No, not at all. Or just is 5 innings, 2 runs, 4 strikeouts wouldn't shock me either. But at the same time, yeah, like Christian Scott getting the most ownership on the slate. I like him, but that's kind of wild. Patrick Sandoval getting the second most ownership against a low strikeout team in Cleveland, by the way. If I had to guess, and I'm not looking at this, I can pull it up now. Matt, you might know off the top of your head around where they are. I would guess Cleveland is bottom 3 to 5 versus lefties in strikeout rate this year.
I don't know off the top of my head. I want to say they're a little bit higher than that, though.
Okay.
They don't strike out a lot still.
Right, they are.
I think they're like maybe 20th, somewhere around there.
Wow, they're 22.6% versus lefties. So
okay.
12.
Yeah, okay, so yeah.
Which is, by the way, that's middle of the league because Minnesota, like Atlanta's 22% at 5th, and they're 15th. So it's the same thing. It's just they're middle of the road strikeouts against lefties this year.
Yeah, and Sandoval's been fine. He's cheap enough where I think he's a fine play. I like Christian Scott slightly more, but not a lot more. I think that Sandoval's a perfectly fine option here. I don't really go out of my way to pick on Cleveland, though. They're not an offense that usually has massive upside for opposing pitchers.
They're top 7 in WOBA, WRC plus, and ISO versus lefties, and second in ISO. That's pretty wild. They've been good against lefties, man.
Yeah, their offense has been good against everyone this year.
True. So again, going down the list one more time, Scott and Sandoval, then the 3rd and 4th highest owned pitchers on the slate. Verlander against Oakland. He's, in my opinion, he's kind of a dart throw at this point. Like Verlander could go for 35 DK points tonight or 13, and neither would surprise me even remotely. Do you have any arguments with that?
No, I wouldn't even argue if you said 35 or -3. I think
right.
Anything is in there. Like when you asked me at the beginning of the show when I was talking about how much I like Gallen, and you were just picking like any pitcher that was getting ownership, but you said Verlander. For me, at that ownership, like I'd rather go to basically anyone else with who Verlander is right now. I still respect his pedigree. I think he's a guy that will always be better than his underlying numbers suggest because of how good a pitcher he is. But he's not in great form. He had that one great start, but he hasn't been great this year. He's pricey. He's owned. I'm good on Verlander.
Yeah. The reason I mentioned him was I wasn't just picking anyone with ownership. I picked him because it's a good matchup in a good park, and he still has shown flashes this year that he can have a really solid outing. But
yeah, I get it. For me personally, and maybe I'm off here, if I were playing 10 lineups and the choice is Gallen or Verlander, I'd pick Gallen in all of them.
Yeah. Jake asked, are we projecting a weird lineup for Arizona right now? I think, honestly, Jake, I think we're projecting a slightly lower implied total than they have. Like we have them at 4.8 and I'm seeing it at 5. That'll obviously change sooner than later. But so I think the Garrett exposure comes down throughout the day, but the tools do show him as a perfectly neutral option at a cheap price. I don't anticipate getting the 50% I'm pulling right now at all. But I do think that, yeah, Zach Gallen is I think Braxton Garrett is we're still gonna get some of him, I would imagine.
I would imagine that a big part of why the Sims are pumping him is because of the Phillies. The Phillies are expensive.
Good call.
So I think Gallen or whoever, even if you want to spend down from Gallen and Braxton Garrett is certainly as for my money right now, again, it's still early in the morning, is one of the highest upside builds I can think of on this slate.
Especially if he's getting no ownership. Also,
yeah,
let's let's not let's not ignore the fact that while you have Philadelphia at Coors Field, that's huge. Right now, I do sometimes worry about this. I hate playing, I'll do it, but I'm not a huge fan of playing teams going straight to Coors Field the next day after a game. And then, they played what? They played a 1:00 game, but still traveling to Coors Field, acclimating to the altitude the very next day, acclimating to how pitches look different in Coors Field. Teams, their first game at Coors Field of a series, road teams, generally don't perform as well. So we'll see. It's going to be really hard to get away from them against Ty Block, though. He's just so bad. So, that kind of overshadows everything else. Let's not ignore the fact, though, Matt, that it's going to be 84 degrees first pitch at Great American Ballpark, where the Dodgers are facing Graham Ashcraft as well.
So real quick to your Coors point, is that something that you feel, or is that something that's been proven? Serious question.
Well, I know that it's been proven that teams leaving Coors Field, their following game are worse. And I'll have to look it up. I remember reading this. This was years ago, but yeah, the teams, their first game at Coors Field have been, less effective than the remaining games of the series.
Okay, so maybe you put a little bit of stock into that. I wouldn't blame you if you do. But as far as our tools go, no matter how good the weather is in Cincy, I don't know how you played the Dodgers over Philly, considering Philly has double the top stack percentage and less ownership. Maybe the Dodgers beat Philly here because they're the Dodgers. They're still better than the Phillies, no matter how good the Phillies are. Great ballpark upgrade for the Dodgers. But, man, if Philly's really going to come in this low owned, they look like one of the best stacks we've seen all year in my eyes.
To be clear, the point I was making was not that the Dodgers are in a better spot or better than Philly.
Sure.
It was that they're popular, and that's why Braxton Garrett and cheap pitchers are popping up so much, because it's not just an expensive Philly stack, but also an expensive Dodger stack in a really good matchup.
Yeah, for sure.
Houston has a run total north of 5 against Ross Stripling. Boston against Bryce Wilson is sitting north of 5 as well. There's a lot of teams with high totals today. And some of these teams are very expensive. You have the Dodgers, Phillies, and Houston all in pretty advantageous spots. And they're 3 of the most expensive stacks on the slate.
Yeah, for sure. So that just makes the viability in someone like Braxton Garrett even higher. Yeah, so Philly and the Dodgers really stand out, obviously, as the 2 top stacks. I will say, though, we've been talking about Burns. Baltimore also looks really good if that game plays. So bunch of really good offenses tonight. I don't think there's any doubt about that, especially when considering we didn't really love pitching.
Mm-hmm. Reading the comments here. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't think it's crazy to assume that teams coming in after playing the day before, adjusting to the altitude. It doesn't seem like the craziest of takes to me. It also doesn't.
For sure not.
It also doesn't really matter. I'm not basing decisions off of that. The reason our tools like him is because Vegas has them with a 6.9 run implied total. Right?
Yeah.
Nothing I'm saying really matters, even though I don't think I'm entirely wrong. But a 6.6 run implied total against Ty Block, it kind of tells you all you need to know.
So I think I'll kind of say it best and tell me if I'm wrong here. What you're saying is not that it overly matters on any particular slate, and the Phillies still look great here, but that's the kind of thing that the tools or projections can't take into account, and it's worth at least mentioning that it's out there. I think that's all you mean by when you say that.
Yeah, that's it. Still going to have a lot of Phillies. Obviously. But anyway, did we miss any pitchers yet? Have we missed, like, are there any other, would you consider Jose Urena? Would you consider Kyle Harrison? Any of these guys down here? James Paxton against Cincinnati getting no ownership?
Urania is one of those guys where I think he's like, I want to pick on him on every slate he's on. He's been decent this year, so maybe that isn't as a good of a stance as it might have been a couple years ago, but I have no interest in playing him, especially with him being more than Braxton Garrett. I don't really think we did miss anyone. Again, if weather holds, I think Gallon and Burns look like the clear top two guys. What about Imanaga if weather's good in that game? I think, and I haven't played a ton of him, just considering the other options, he's definitely viable. I don't like him as much as Gallon, but certainly viable, just considering he's been the best pitcher on the slate.
Yeah, he's so good that, I mean, if I want to, before we even get to that, and we'll have live before live tonight, I want to know what ownership looks like on Imanaga if it turns out the weather looks better.
Yeah, same.
Peter said we're overthinking the Rockies thing. Now, listen, dude, I'll tell you right now, it's a near certainty that the Phillies will be far and away my highest owned stack. It's a near certainty that they will be far and away my highest owned stack. I'm just thinking out loud, dude. That's why I like the Sims, because it allows me to get away from certain lines of thinking that could be otherwise detrimental to my results. You know what I mean?
It's pretty easy to just sit here and be like, Philly's in a good spot. Play them against high block in Colorado. Like, doesn't take much into that. Like, the extra nuance stuff is what we're here for. So I really appreciate it.
It's fun to talk about. And by the way, you want to check the Sims out, week or a month, however you want to play it, or just any of our tools. Like if you do the Sims package, by the way, you're getting all of our tools for baseball, like all of them, not just the Sims or the post-contest simulator, the late swap tool. You're getting ownership. You're getting top stacks. You're getting top pitchers tool, top hitters tool, player projections, premium Discord, lineup generator too. If you want to use that, all of it's included. So the package has every tool for baseball across the board. You guys will love it. Man, the early slate the other day, I sent it to some of the fellas here. The top three in the relay throw, it was like the 50K to first on the early slate the other day. The top three were all three of them were stochastic avatar. I think actually 2 and 3. Jake, correct me if I'm wrong, because I know you're a Sims user. Jake DeWitt in chat, I'm pretty sure that you were second and third in that, right? Last week? When the stochastic avatar took it down, I think you were second and third for like 15 and 5K a piece. Could be wrong. You tell me. I can't remember, but I know it's been a wild ride, and a good wild ride for the stochastic avatars rocking the Sims and using the lineup generator. So we'd love to have you guys. Say hi in Discord if you decide to sign up. Yeah, Jake said it was him. He can attest to it. Anyway, I just want to take one quick peek over pitchers before we. I don't like just ignoring anybody here. Bailey Ober's been good. Texas has been bad, but I still don't love this, particularly with the winds blowing out as well. But it is interesting. Texas with a 4.1 run implied total. Outside of the first game of the season where he gave up 3 home runs, Ober's done a great job of limiting power. The Yu Darvish against the Yankees, 19% ownership. That one stood out to me a lot, Matt.
I don't really buy it. I guess he's cheap enough where it makes sense. Like,
he's damn good.
He's very good. He's certainly not an amazing DFS pitcher at this point in his career, and brutal matchup. That said, you get a big ballpark downgrade for the Yankees. I could see Darvish. Maybe I'm off there that he's overowned. Like, I like him better than Sanchez at comparable price points. I probably like Sandoval a little bit more, but it's close enough. I'm personally just not sure I get to that pricing tier.
I don't have a huge issue with Darvish because he is the type of guy in tough matchups that can go out and just outright win slates. Like,
right.
His last 2 starts, 7 2-hit scoreless innings against the Dodgers, 7 strikeouts. His following start in Atlanta, 7 scoreless, 2-hit innings with 9 strikeouts. Like, this dude just produced 232 plus DraftKings point starts consecutively against the Dodgers and the Atlanta Braves. So, I mean, I look at the matchup and I go, yeah, it kind of sucks against the Yankees. They're not striking out at a high clip, but it's a negative park shift for these Yankee bats going from Yankee Stadium to San Diego, traveling across the country. I think, didn't the Yankees just play at home yesterday?
Yep, against Seattle.
Yeah, so they played at home. Yesterday. They didn't have Thursday off. Traveling to San Diego, across the country. Take that for what it's worth, but I actually don't hate Darvish today.
I'm with you. He's the best pitcher in this price range. Like,
Agreed.
Say what you want about, his DFS upside the past couple of years, but as you mentioned, in amazing form right now. Now, I'm sure that's not going to continue, but yeah, you're right. He is certainly the type of guy where don't care as much about the matchup because he's just such a good pitcher in real life. It is a scary matchup, though. Like, he's not safe here by any means, but he's definitely a lot safer than someone like Braxton Garrett and too cheap, all things considered. So I'm with you. I'm glad you mentioned him. He does look better than I originally thought.
Also, I mean, I know they haven't been striking out, but there are some strikeouts in this lineup.
Yeah, for sure. It's just
not a ton.
The top of their lineup is so tough with Judge and Soto when they're both going like they are now.
They're a great baseball team. They're number 1 in WRC plus versus righties. Let's not, ignore that. I'm just saying Darvish is good enough to go out and put up, pristine numbers against good teams. That's all.
And yeah, to your point, any lineup with Giancarlo Stanton has some K's in it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Darvish is what, 8K?
Yeah, he's too cheap, man. I'm with you. I'm real glad you brought him up.
Before we get on to some we've already talked bats here. We like to, move around a little bit, but just looking at this range, would you rather do me a favor, look from 8K up to 9K, 8K up to 9,200 Rodon, because then it gets really expensive. Who would your favorite option be? Rodon, Crawford, Verlander, Harrison, Bailey Ober, Paxton, or Darvish?
I think it's Darvish, pretty easily. He's the cheapest and the best pitcher right now out of the bunch. So yeah, it's Darvish.
I think so too. At home.
Ownership isn't crazy at all either. 19% is whatever.
Yeah. I wouldn't even be surprised if he's less than that, truthfully.
Same. I don't expect him to get to be 25 to 30%. I expect him to be 15 to 20%.
Yeah. Agreed. I think 15% sounds about right on an 11-game slate against the Yankees.
Yeah, no one wants to pick on the Yankees right now for good reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it's all the things we said about Garrett, and I know that Garrett is a lot cheaper, but still, he's in a brutal matchup too. So it's kind of a pick your poison type of deal here.
Yep. Pretty much. Last question. Any other cheap pitchers? We talked about Waldron yesterday. It could have been better. I think he went 5 innings, 2 runs, and 7 strikeouts. Just didn't get the win and had some inefficient innings. But he was fine. But even if you don't want to play those guys, I think it always makes a lot of sense on these days, on these slates, for us to see if there's anybody down there that you think is a viable pivot. I think it's probably Garrett, right?
Well, yeah, because the thing is, he's not getting ownership. So, right. I don't think you need a pivot from him,
A Stripling, that tie block, Flexen against Baltimore, Michaelis against the Cubs, bad weather, and he's already 10% owned.
As much as I hate saying it, the guy would be Urania.
I was going to say Minnesota. Yep.
Minnesota strikes out a lot, and he's been decent this year. So if you force me to pick one, it would be Urania. The other guys just aren't even remotely viable in my mind.
Agreed. And we're talking like cheap, but also low owned. Not cheap,
Yeah.
but owned. Not like Christopher Sanchez or Sandoval, those type of guys. I was going to ask you about Logan Allen, but I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
My thing with him is I like Sandoval more and I like Sanchez even more. Like, I know he's coming off a high upside start, but it is a good matchup. He just doesn't stand out to me. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Is Logan Allen
different guy?
What's that?
It's not the same Logan Allen. That there's two Logan Allens floating around.
Yeah, no, I think one's on the Diamondbacks. That's not what I was getting.
Okay, sorry.
Is Logan Allen that much worse than these other guys in that price range? Angels have not been bad against lefties for what it's worth, but this is the last question. Then we'll move on. I promise you guys. But feel free to comment and chat. Sometimes I'm just posing questions, thinking through things. Fuck, it's Friday morning. You know, Slate doesn't start for like 8 hours. What else am I going to do? He's 2%. Sanchez is 23%. Christian Scott's 28%. All about the same price. Should it be that way?
You know, maybe it's a little bit too drastic as far as the ownership splits, but the goal isn't to just build the most contrarian lineups. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
So, like, yeah, I think that that's a viable way to get different. I think there's 20 other more viable ways for me to want to get different personally.
My question is never, can we just be contrarian to be contrarian? That's a fast track to losing. It was more so, do you think they're over-owned and he's under-owned? And what you're saying is maybe a little bit, but not enough to make a difference.
Yeah.
I agree.
Maybe if, like, I think Scott is the one I'd be worried about coming in much higher than his ownership projection suggests. But as of now, I tend to pretty much agree with the ownerships because I don't necessarily think that Logan Allen looks all that much better than like Kyle Harrison, albeit Harrison's a little more, you know what I mean? They're all the same.
Yeah. Also, Angels really have been a lot better against lefties than righties this year, even without Trout. So, yeah, I hear you. Philly's a pretty easy one to talk about. I have 50% five-man Philly stacks right now, dude. That's nuts. 50% five-man Philly. Right now, and I assume things will change a little bit throughout the day. Weather has impacts, ownership changes, things change, right? It's still early. Like, if that is the case, because I have 18% four-man Philly stacks, 11% three-man Philly stacks in the Sims. If that is the case, then my entire day is contingent upon how this Philly team does at Coors Field. But the Sims right now, absolutely spitting out a ton of them. My only thing, Matt, I think that Philly stack ownership comes up in our tools. I can't imagine it doesn't throughout the day.
It has to. I mean,
yes. So I think I think I still get a ton, but not like 70%.
And especially in the contest that I'm playing, you know, I talk about this a lot. Right now, the only hitters we have projected for higher than 10% ownership on the Phillies is Real Muto at 17.5% and Edmundo Sosa at 13%. Like, there's no way Castellanos under 5K against the lefty is going to be under 10% owned. Same with Rojas, Harper, Schwarber, Bohm, Merrifield. Like, all these guys are going to get ownership. I don't see how they don't.
Agreed. I actually kind of don't hate the Angels against Logan Allen.
Yeah, I think my biggest problem with them is kind of like you talked about with Oakland against Verlander. Like, in theory, I really like them, but it does feel like the type of slate. Yeah, it feels like the type of slate that's going to take a lot from your offense. I know I
think you're right.
The Angels have gotten there recently, but I don't know. Go ahead.
No, I think you're right. Logan Allen's allowed multiple home runs in 4 games this season. He does give up power. Angels remarkably have like a 166 ISO versus left-handed pitching, which is just wild. 162 ISO. Some of that's clearly accounting for Trout, but they've still been pretty good. But yeah, it feels difficult to do that. St. Louis against Imanaga, I have zero interest in that. Miami against Gallen, I'm not getting there. Or even Oakland against Verlander. To me, it's just one of those spots where if I'm not getting to Verlander, there's a high likelihood that I'm just not getting to Oakland either. The Dodgers, I have a bit of the problem right now is that I'm just getting so much Philly that I'm not getting really much else. You know what I am getting to though? Boston against Bryce Wilson.
Yeah, they probably work as fill-ins. I mean, they're the best. They're the top value stack on the board. So that's why ownership is there. Big total. Bryce Wilson isn't any good. Again, ownership is there, but I understand why, because they're really cheap for the spot they're in.
So you don't buy into Bryce Wilson's 2.79 ERA?
No. No.
Yeah, probably not.
He's also in the blue. His StatCast page is totally blue. So yeah, he is due for some serious negative regression.
Exactly. 80 degrees at first pitch. Winds blowing out to right field at 10 miles per hour in Boston today. Definite quality hitting weather there.
Yeah, for sure, man. There are a bunch of good stacks on the board because I'm thinking about a team like Houston, who has been popular a lot recently. They just faced Stripling and they were very popular at home. Now, because of the casualty of the slate, like not just because they're in Oakland, but because they're expensive and there's multiple other expensive stacks that look and project slightly better or better, they are going to be very low owned. I like using Houston in spots like this. Like their upside is always massive. It's just whether you can prioritize them because there's so much opportunity cost. And I know I said Loughran has been decent this year. I still think he's awful. Minnesota looks good to me here. They're coming in with a good amount of leverage. I'm not buying what Loughran is selling, but like with every other team, there is, no matter who you play, there's just a lot of opportunity cost. This is going to be a high scoring slate. I would think.
What about the Rockies against Sanchez?
I'm fine with it.
You knew I was going to ask.
I'm fine with it. Like, per the tools, it's a classic, not great, bad offense against a pitcher that's probably a little bit too popular. You get the added bonus of being in cores, but I will say everything you said about Philly coming to Colorado applies to Colorado today too. They've been on a West Coast road trip. I never really like teams their first day back from a long road trip. I don't love Colorado here, but they do offer nice leverage and they're in a good ballpark. So they have upside. They're also expensive though. So it's like, what do you do with that? You know?
Yeah. Also 2 straight extra inning games.
Yeah. I hate that for them.
Yeah. Helps Philly though, if you're taxing those bullpens even further for the Rockies. But yeah, it's tough. I have another question. And by the way, let me know where you guys stand as well. Cleveland against Sandoval. If you're catching on to the theme here, Matt, I'm asking you about some of these not great pitchers that are getting a ton of ownership and stacks on the other side of that game, specifically Colorado, and then Cleveland against Sandoval, who's getting a lot of ownership right now, second most on the slate.
Yeah, not for me, really. Again, Cleveland they've got good numbers against pitching of all sides this year, but they do strike out against left-handed pitching. And while I don't think Sandoval is great, I think he's pretty good. So I think I like the Sandoval side more than I like the Guardian side here. There's just too many other offenses that aren't getting love for me to like Cleveland here. Like personally, and I might be completely off here, I'd rather stack the Giants against unknown and unproven Christian Scott, who I predict will be a lot more owned than Sandoval.
I can understand that. Sure. I'm trying to see if there's I'm trying to look, is there anything else that jumps out at me?
One does for me. Milwaukee. Oh, sorry.
Oh, against Cutter Crawford? Yeah, fire away. Let's hear it.
Well, Crawford's been very good this year, but the same weather that Boston gets, Milwaukee also gets. They have about identical top stack percentage as Boston and about a third of the ownership. So, yeah, Milwaukee just stands out. They're also guaranteed the ninth at bat. I personally don't think they look all that different from teams like Minnesota, Arizona, etc. But our tools like them a lot. I'm interested to see how they adjust during the day.
I can appreciate that. And I'll throw out Minnesota against Urania, but I don't love that. Like, only because he has a 51% ground ball rate, doesn't give up a lot of power. So I don't know how much the wind is really going to benefit him there. The one that I'll leave you with this. I do think there's something to be said about Texas against Bailey Ober today.
I was just about to say that too.
You know, I really do. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tell you why. You guys feel free to play Bailey Ober, go for it. But if there was a spot where he gets into some real trouble, and I think he's fine. I don't think he's great. You know what I mean? He's been good. I still think he's going to give up power. He on the season has a 53% fly ball rate, 55% against lefties. There's just like 10% barrel rate, which is not great. It's not bad, but the ball is in the air. Wind's blowing out the center at 15 miles per hour. There is very much something to be said. Like, if Bailey Ober is if Texas is putting the ball in play, they don't strike out at a high clip at all. And yes, of course, it's only going to be 70 degrees there, but still, with winds blowing out and him being a extreme fly ball, not just a fly ball pitcher, Bailey Ober is a pretty extreme fly ball pitcher, particularly this season. It could just develop into one of those games where you end up getting like 3 homers for Texas off of Ober.
Yeah. And this is ultimately why teams like Texas, that is, why I personally probably won't play Philly in like 3 max stuff, single entry, because as good as they look in the tools right now, as far as ownership goes, I just know how this works. And Philly and the Dodgers are going to be very high owned, and everyone else is going to be low owned, except for pieces of Boston. So give me my chances on basically anyone else, knowing that, you know, fading the top teams on the slate is always a risky proposition considering the spots they're in.
I hear you, man. I do. Texas might be my favorite contrarian stack right now.
Yeah, I could see that. I think both sides of that game, like, you're right about Urania's ground ball rate, but I also just don't think he's good. So I don't know. It does also, like, baseball's a weird sport where, like, you don't see like NBA players get better like 10 years into their career. You know, they don't get more athletic. Very true. But like pitchers, if they can, you know, get a new pitch or fix something in their delivery, they can become like a completely different guy. Maybe that's what's happened with Urania. I don't know. I mean, there's a reason he's been given a shot by the Rangers, you know?
I hear you. And he has not been bad. He doesn't have any strikeout stuff. I don't want to really roster him, but he hasn't been bad. I like Texas over Minnesota, I think. But I think so too. Like top 3 stacks, I'm going Philly up top for sure. Although, how I will say that ownership's got to come up. There's just no way it does. I'd be shocked if that ownership didn't come up. I'd end up having an exorbitant amount of Philly. Second, give me Boston against Wilson. I think we both expect some regression there. They're good value. They're a little bit owned. And then as a contrarian play, give me Texas against Bailey Ober. Who do you have top 3?
I think it's got to be Philly. They just look so much better than everyone else. Even our top stack tool implies that. Then I'm going to go with Houston. Talked about them. They look really good and they're not going to get much love. And then my contrarian, and I'm just going to play off the pitcher ownership. Give me San Francisco. They've been feisty recently. Not a great ballpark for hitting, but better than San Francisco. And Scott's getting a ton of ownership. So give me San Fran.
All right. A couple other people throwing him out there. Diamondbacks for Bliff, or is it Biff? Diamondbacks for David. Royals for Rance. That'll be tough. They're not on the slate.
Yeah.
Or unless he's saying the Royals rocked them. Saying that, no. I don't know. Eric, Logan Allen, but weirdly been much better on the road. Yeah. It's hard to say. Those are the three. Pitching is, I'm gonna side with you here. Gallon does, after we talk through all of that, he clearly does look like the best. Two, I'm gonna do it, Matt. You're not gonna like this, but don't worry. You'll have your time. Justin Verlander. And then three, I think I'll probably throw Braxton Garrett out there, dirt cheap, no ownership. I think that's probably going to be like the low-owned contrarian option for me.
I'm not even mad. I'm just disappointed. Gallon, number one for me. Darvish, number two. Like,
I like that.
After everything we talked about, it's got to be Darvish for me. And then I'll agree with you on Garrett. He seems like the clear cheap guy to get to.
Verlander's had a couple ugly starts, but I mean, he's also had a couple strong starts too. We'll see.
He's had one real good start.
One real good start. Then one real bad start.
He's walking too many guys for my liking.
He is. Oakland.
It's not like, yeah, I mean, listen, at the end of the day, he's facing Oakland. Darvish is facing the Yankees. So I can't really argue it, you know?
Oakland, like the Rockies, they've had a long couple days of baseball for sure, but they are at home. Anyway, appreciate you guys. Hey, if you haven't done so, follow Matt at Fantasy Tips Matt, me at Lafayette_D. You want to check out the Sims or the lineup? Do this. Even if you just want to poke around and you're not, ready to commit, go into the description. You'll see it. All of the different packages we have for the week or the month. Check them out. See if there's something you want to try. Make better lineups. You know what I mean? Put yourself in a better position to win each day using these tools for MLB and other sports as well. Plus, we'd love to have you over there. Join the community in the Discord. It's a great community. Until next time, we'll see you back here on the Strategy Show. Have a great weekend, everyone. Peace.